Mary Okoro was 11 years old, the youngest of 3 children in her family. She lived in a bustling neighborhood in Lagos with her parents, Mike and Bridget, and her 2 older siblings, Samuel and Chinyere. Mary had only heard about her grandmother in hushed conversations. She had never met her. Neither had her siblings. Their mother, Bridget, seemed to dislike the old woman and would always brush off any questions about her. "She doesn't live here," Bridget would say sharply whenever the topic came up. "You don't need to worry about her." But this Christmas, everything changed. It started when Mary overheard Samuel and Chinyere whispering in their room. "That mom is really sick," Samuel said. "I heard she might come here," Chinyere replied. Mary's ears perked up. Their grandmother coming to stay with them? She ran to ask her mother about it, but Bridget's expression darkened. "Who told you that?" Bridget demanded. Mary shrank back. "Samuel and Chinyere said those 2 talk too much," Bridget snapped. "Go and finish your chores." Mary did as she was told, but the idea of meeting her grandmother stayed in her mind. She couldn't understand why her mother seemed so angry about it. Later that evening, Mary overheard her parents arguing in the kitchen. "She has no one else, Bridget," Mike said, his voice tired. "My siblings are out of the country. Who else to take care of her?" "I don't care, Mike," Bridget fired back. "You know how I feel about her." "But she's my mother, and I'm your wife. Why should I have to deal with her?" The argument ended with Bridget storming out of the kitchen. 2 days later, Grandma arrived. Mary and her siblings stood by the window peeking out as their father helped Grandma out of the car. She wasn't as old looking as Mary had expected. Her smooth skin and delicate features surprised all the children. "She doesn't look like a grandma," Chinyere whispered. "She looks beautiful," Samuel added. Bridget's voice broke the moment. Will you stop staring and go to your rooms?" she barked. From the beginning, it was clear that Bridget didn't want Grandma there. She spoke to her only when necessary, and her tone was always sharp and rude. But the children couldn't help being drawn to Grandma. They were curious to know who she was. Whenever their mother wasn't around, they would sneak into her room to listen to her stories. "You know," Grandma said one afternoon, "you all look just like me when I was young." Mary smiled, but when she told her mother about it later, Bridget dismissed it. "Don't believe everything she says," Bridget muttered. Still, Mary couldn't understand why her mother disliked Grandma so much. The old woman was kind, funny, and always had a smile for everyone. By the end of the first week, Grandma's health improved. She started moving around the house, helping with little tasks, despite Bridget's protest. "I told you not to touch anything in this house," Bridget snapped one morning when she found Grandma washing dishes. "I can do it myself, or my kids will. Just get better and go back to the village, please." The tension between them grew worse each day. One evening, Grandma called Mary into her room. She handed her a small beaded bracelet. "This is for you, my child," Grandma said. The bracelet was beautiful, with colorful beads that sparkled under the light. "What's it for?" Mary asked. She smiled. "It's a family treasure," Grandma explained. "It will protect you and make you look more beautiful." Mary was so happy and slipped it onto her wrist. It was late in the evening, and Mary sat on the floor in her room, drawing on a piece of paper. From the corner of her ear, she heard her parents talking in whispers in the living room. "Mike, I'm still surprised how your mom recovered so quickly," Bridget said. "This was a woman the doctor said wouldn't last another week in the village. Then she comes here and in less than 7 days, she's as strong as ever." "And what are you insinuating?" Mike's voice was sharp. Bridget sighed. "Mike, you know your mother. Stop pretending. You're just as suspicious as I am." There was a brief silence, Mary leaned closer to her door to hear better. "I am," Mike admitted reluctantly. "But she said she's changed. She begged us to forgive her. After all, none of our children are sick or dead. Isn't that proof enough that she's not the same again?" Bridget's voice rose slightly. "Yet? None of our children are sick or dead yet, Mike. Can you vouch for her? Can you swear that she's not hiding something or she has not done something already?" "Bridget, stop," Mike said firmly. "We've been through this. Let's just believe her and hope for the best, at least for now." "Mike, you're joking. You want to believe the same woman who confessed to using her children and her husband in that secret society? Have you forgotten your father's mysterious death and ours?" Mary froze. What were they talking about? What did her mother mean by a secret society? Her heart raced as she tried to place it together. The next morning, Mary found Chinyere in their room, reading a book. Mary sat on the bed and stared at her elder sister until Chinyere noticed. "What is it, Mary?" Chinyere asked, closing her book. "Sister Chinyere, did Grandma do something bad before?" Mary asked carefully. Chinyere's face turned serious. "And why are you asking?" "I heard Mom and Dad talking last night," Mary admitted. Chinyere sighed. "First of all, did you take anything from Grandma? Biscuits, gift, whatever. Did you take anything from her?" Mary hesitated. She thought about the bracelet on her wrist, but quickly shook her head. "No, I took nothing." Chinyere studied her for a moment, then leaned closer. "Don't tell Mom that I told you. Mom told me something a long time ago. She said Grandma was part of a deadly secret society." Mary's eyes widened. "And what's that?" "It's like a group that does evil things. According to Mom, Grandma used 2 of her children and their father in the society. That's why Grandpa died mysteriously. Grandma later confessed to everything and said she left the group and that she has repented. But Mom doesn't believe her." "But why doesn't she believe her?" Mary asked. "Because of what happened to our baby brother," Chinyere said in a whisper. Mary's heart skipped a beat. "We had the baby brother." Chinyere nodded. "Yes. You weren't born yet. He was 6 months old when Grandma came to stay with us because she was very sick. Mom said he was fine, perfectly healthy, but one night he died in his sleep. And then what happened? Grandma got better. She went from being so weak she couldn't walk to looking completely fine. Mom believes that Grandma used her baby's life to heal herself. She chased her out that same night and told her never to come back. That's why we never knew Grandma." Mary felt cold all over. "But do you think it's true about Grandma?" "I don't know, Mary," Chinyere admitted, "but Mom is convinced that she's not good. Just stay away from her." That night, Bridget called Mary and her siblings into the living room. Her face was tight with worry. "I have a question for you." Samuel and Chinyere exchanged nervous glances. Mary stayed quiet, her hands twisting in her lap. "I can remember telling you all before Grandma came that you should not take anything from her," Bridget began. "Did any of you disobey me?" The room was silent. Mary's heart thumped loudly in her chest. She thought about the bracelet on her wrist, hidden under her sleeve. Slowly, she raised her hand to confess. But the moment she opened her mouth, the words disappeared. "I repeat, did anyone take anything?" Bridget pressed again. "No, Mom," Chinyere and Samuel said in unison. Mary hesitated, her hand still half raised, but then she lowered it. "No, Mom," she echoed, her voice shaky. Bridget narrowed her eyes. "Good. I don't want any lies. If I find out that any of you did, you regret it." When school resumed, Mary decided to forget everything that had happened over the holidays. Maybe it was all a dream, she told herself. On her first day back, she greeted her friends with a bright smile. They laughed, played as usual. For the first time in weeks, she felt normal again. The next morning, she made a bold decision. She took off the bracelet and hid it in her room. "It's over now," she thought. "I'll be fine without it." But the peace didn't last long. On the second day of school, the voices returned. "Mary," they would call. She froze in the middle of class, her pen trembling in her hand. She shook her head, trying to ignore them, but they grew louder and more persistent. The next day, as she and Samuel rode with their mother to school in her car, the voices spoke again. "Touch your mother's shoulder," they said. "What? Why?" Mary thought, alarmed. "Just do it." Mary hesitated, then reached out and lightly touched her mother's shoulder. Bridget glanced at her and smiled. "Mary, what is it?" she asked. "I'm okay, Mom." But the moment her hand touched Bridget, the car swelled violently. Bridget screamed as the car spun off the road and ran into a deep ditch. Mary touched her forehead and felt something wet, blood. Her mother had a broken arm and neck. Samuel had lost 3 teeth and injured his arm, and Mary had a deep head wound that almost cost her life. Within days, they were back home, but the memory of the accidents lingered. The voices grew stronger after the accident, controlling Mary's every move. They told her what to say, what to do, and how to act. Sometimes she resisted, but it was like fighting against a powerful wave. One afternoon, as she played with her friends, the voices instructed her to trip a boy running by. She didn't want to, but her leg moved on its own. The boy fell hard, scraping his knee. Mary, her teacher scolded. What's wrong with you? I didn't mean to, ma, Mary said, tears filling her eyes, but deep down she knew it wasn't entirely a lie. That night, Mary couldn't sleep. She kept staring at the bracelet on her wrist, remembering how Grandma had given it to her with so much care. At first, it felt special, like a treasure. Now it felt heavy, like it was watching her. The nightmare started again. In the dream, Mary was standing in a dark room. Around her were strange people wearing black robes. They were chanting words she didn't understand. In the middle of the room, there was a fire burning, and above it floated a dark figure. You are one of us now, the figure said, its voice echoing. Welcome, child. Mary wanted to run, but her feet wouldn't move. She felt like she belonged there, even though it scared her. Mary woke up sweating, her heart pounding, and the room felt too dark. I need to tell Mom, she thought, but then she hesitated. What if her mother didn't believe her, or worse, what if she got angry and blamed Grandma? Mary stayed silent, hoping that the nightmares would stop. Slowly, Mary's life became something she barely recognized. She never saw the members physically, but met them in her dreams. They came at night, their voices commanding her, their demands growing bolder. Mary tried to resist. She would stay awake, keeping her eyes wide open long after everyone had gone to bed. But no matter how hard she tried, she always found herself drifting off. And once she was asleep, they were there, waiting for her. Your task is to destroy, they reminded her. The changes in Mary became visible at school. Her classmates noticed her odd behavior. She would stare blankly for long periods, then suddenly smile as if hearing a joke no one else did. One day, during a math class, Mary raised her hand and waved it in the air, pretending to yawn. Immediately, two classmates, Choma and David, immediately began coughing. At first, everyone thought it was a coincidence, but then the coughing turned violent. Blood spewed from Choma's mouth, staining her uniform. The class screamed in panic. Teachers rushed in and took both children to the hospital. David recovered after a while, but unfortunately, Choma died. The school authorities called it a health complication, but Mary knew better. It was her doing. Another time, Mary was sitting in class when the voices spoke to her. Take his book, they commanded. She turned to see Ugu, the brightest boy in class, busy writing notes. He was always friendly and polite, never giving anyone a reason to dislike him. But why? Mary asked silently. Do it, the voice insisted. Mary obeyed. She slipped Ugo's book into her bag and took it home. That night, she saw the book in her dream. The next day, Ugo was different. He sat quietly in class, muttering to himself. By the end of the week, he had become completely withdrawn. His parents eventually pulled him out of school to seek psychiatric help. At first, Mary felt horrible. She cried at night, begging the voices to stop using her for evil. But as time went on, her emotions dulled. She became like a puppet, following their orders without resistance. One afternoon, Mary went to the school cafeteria during break time. She bought some snacks and was about to leave when she noticed a girl sitting alone, her head resting on her desk. Buy her something, the voice said. For once, the command seemed harmless. Mary approached the girl and offered her a packet of biscuits and a drink. Thank you, the girl said, her eyes lighting up. I forgot my lunch at home and I've been so hungry. Mary smiled, feeling a flicker of happiness. Maybe I'm not so bad after all, she thought. But that night, the girl appeared in Mary's dream. She stood in the center of the dark room, surrounded by the cult members. She's one of us now, the leader said as they all laughed. Mary's stomach tightened. She hadn't meant to do that. She didn't want anyone else to suffer the way she was suffering. No! She cried out. Please let her go! But her pleas were ignored. At home, Mary's behavior grew stranger. Mary, what is wrong with you? Her mom asked one evening. Mary forced a smile. I'm fine, Mom. It's just school. Her siblings also noticed the change. Chinye once asked, why do you look so sad and withdrawn these days? Hope school is not burdening you. No, I'm very fine, Auntie. But in her room, she would sit on her bed and cry. She wondered what her family would do if they ever found out the truth. Would they hate her? Would they send her away? Her thoughts often drifted to her grandmother. Maybe Grandma can help me get out of this, she thought. After all, she got me into it. Anger bubbled beneath her. Why didn't I listen to Mom? She muttered one night. Why did Grandma have to come here in the first place? Hell broke loose one fateful afternoon. Bridget was arranging items in her small supermarket when her phone rang. It was Mary's school. Good afternoon, Mrs. Okoro, the voice on the other end said. We need you to come to the school immediately. There has been an incident involving your daughter, Mary. Bridget's heart sank. What happened? Please come as soon as you can, the voice urged. Bridget quickly gave instructions to her sales girl and rushed to the school, her mind racing with possibilities. What could Mary have done? Hope she's safe. When she arrived, the principal and Mary's teacher were waiting for her in the office. Good afternoon, ma. Your daughter got into a fight with a boy in her class, the principal said gravely. A fight? Bridget repeated, stunned. Mary doesn't fight. She wouldn't even fight to save herself. Something is wrong here, Madam Principal. The teacher shook her head. No, ma. This wasn't an ordinary fight. Your daughter fought like a beast. The young boy is in the hospital right now. We really hope he survives. Bridget's leg felt weak. The principal continued. Unfortunately, we'll have to expel Mary. The boy's parents are demanding it. They refuse to let their son return to a school where your daughter is present. But my daughter is not a murderer, Bridget snapped, her voice trembling with anger and fear. I understand your feelings, Mrs. Okoro, the principal said calmly, but we have to consider the safety of all our students, and right now your daughter is a threat. Bridget couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her sweet, quiet Mary was being described as a monster. She turned to her daughter, who sat quietly in the corner of the office, her head bowed. Mary, dear, Bridget said softly. What happened? Mary didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind replayed the scene from earlier that day. The boy had accidentally bumped into her in the hallway when the voices immediately screamed, Attack him! Before she could think, her fists were flying. The next thing she saw was blood all over the place. I don't know, Mom, Mary whispered finally, crying. Bridget stared at her daughter, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, she wondered if the strange things she felt about Mary over the past few months were more than just motherly worries. Mary sat quietly in her room that night, her mind racing. The court had spoken to her again in her dreams. They congratulated her on completing her assignment at the current school and told her that the fight with the boy, which led to her expulsion, was orchestrated by them. You're moving to a new school, they said in their chilling voices. Your work here is done. Remember, no one must know about us. If you speak, you or your family members will be in grave danger. But this time, Mary was too scared to continue. She couldn't keep living like this. She was scared of the court. She wanted her life back. Very early the next morning, she ran to her mother's room. But before she went, she grabbed a sheet of paper and wrote everything down. She took the bracelet too. Mary, what's this? Her father asked. Read it, Daddy, read it. Bridget sat up and began reading. As she reached the end, her face turned pale. She stood up, clutched her head and let out a piercing scream. Mike, your mother has ruined us, oh, Bridget wailed. We should have let that woman die in the village. She's evil. Mike sat frozen, staring at the bracelet. He didn't say a word, but his clenched fist and trembling lips showed his anger. Mary couldn't hold back her tears. She collapsed to the floor, burying her face in her hands. Her loud sobs filled the room. Hearing the commotion, Chinye and Samuel ran into the room. What's happening? Chinye asked, alarmed. It's Mary, oh. Her grandmother initiated her into a cult. Samuel asked, as they knelt beside Mary. Don't cry, Mary, Samuel said, patting her back gently. It's not your fault. You're only a victim. But I shouldn't have taken the bracelet. Mommy told us. Mommy warned us. The room fell silent. Mike and Bridget sat deep in thought, their faces hard. What are we going to do now? Bridget asked, her voice trembling. Mike didn't reply. He stood up quickly, grabbed his car keys and headed for the door. Where are you going? Bridget called after him. But before Mike could answer, Mary suddenly fainted. Mary! Mary! Bridget screamed, rushing to her. Mike hurried back into the room. Together, they carried Mary to the bed. Bridget fetched water and gently sprinkled it on Mary's face. After a few tense moments, Mary's eyes opened. But something was wrong. She lay very still, her breathing slow, her eyes closed. It was as if she was caught between life and death. "Bridget," Mike said, his voice firm but filled with fear. "I don't think this is a medical condition. We are taking this girl to a pastor tomorrow." The next morning, Mike and Bridget carried Mary in their car to the church. The pastor, a middle-aged man, listened carefully as Mike and Bridget explained everything. "My daughter is in trouble," Bridget cried. "Please help us, Pastor. Save our daughter." The pastor nodded solemnly. "This is serious, but it's not too much for God to handle." The prayer session was intense. Church members joined in, clapping, shouting, and praying fervently. After what felt like hours, Mary suddenly went still. The room fell silent. The pastor knelt beside her. "Mary, can you hear me?" She nodded. Slowly, Mary opened her eyes. She looked around. "She's free!" the pastor shouted. Bridget let out a loud cry of relief and ran to embrace her daughter. Mike joined them. The next day, the family received shocking news. Mike's mother, Mary's grandmother, had passed away in the village. Bridget was the first to react. "It's over! Thank God for saving us!" Mike said nothing, but a heavy sigh escaped his lips. Mary's life slowly returned to normal. She stopped having the nightmares and the voices in her head disappeared. Her family, though still shaking, comforted her with love and support.